Welcome to World History Lesson 16, European Nationalism. Our lesson objectives are: explain the growth of nationalism during the late Middle Ages, identify the characteristics of the Tudor monarchy, identify the major events of the Reconquista, identify the major events of the Spanish Inquisition. The emergence of nationalism. The Middle Ages provided one lasting change to Europe, the emergence of nationalism among its people. Nationalism means a feeling of deep loyalty to one's country rather than individual leaders. Between 1300 and 1500, France and England became nation-states, a new type of country due to the people and nobles pushing through new laws. A nation-state is a group of people who live in a defined territory and are united under one government. They generally speak the same language and have a feeling of belonging and sense of loyalty to their country. The monarchs or kings and queens of Europe all had family names. For example, France was ruled by the Carolingians, the Capets, and the Bourbons. In Germany, the Habsburgs, Hohenzollerns, and the Hanovers ruled. England had been ruled by the House of Orange, the Yorks, the Tudors, the Stuarts, and the Windsors. The Tudor monarchy. Henry VII, or Henry Tudor, of the House of Lancaster, was crowned king after the War of the Roses. Henry VII became the founder of the Tudor dynasty. Henry VII married a woman from the House of York to bring peace between the House of Lancaster and the House of York. Henry VII ruled until 1509. The next king of England is one of the most famous. A large man, King Henry VIII, was married 6 times. The story of his marriages has been described in books, movies, and songs. Henry VIII was 18 when he became King of England. He married a Spanish princess named Catherine of Aragon. Catherine of Aragon was the daughter of Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain, and the marriage was an attempt to create peaceful ties between the two countries. Henry VIII was not happy with Catherine of Aragon because she gave birth to a daughter, Mary Tudor, instead of a son. Henry VIII needed a male heir to continue the Tudor dynasty after his death. The Tudor dynasty would end with Henry VIII without a male heir. In 1529, Henry VIII wanted a divorce from Queen Catherine, but the Pope denied his request as they were forbidden in the Catholic faith. Another reason the request was denied was the Church was being criticized and attacked for the Reformation. An important reason for the Pope's refusal was political, as Queen Catherine was the aunt of the German Emperor Charles V. Charles V had control over the Pope, so the Pope was unable to exercise his power without Charles V's permission. Henry VIII was angered by this and did not want to be told that he could or could not do by the Pope. Henry VIII made a new law in 1534 called the Act of Supremacy, which allowed the king could obtain a divorce. The Pope was angry and excommunicated Henry VIII, forbidding the king to worship in the Catholic Church. Through the Act of Supremacy and his following excommunication, Henry VIII made himself head of the Church of England, or Anglican Church. After divorcing Catherine of Aragon, Henry VIII married Anne Boleyn. Henry VIII actually married Anne Boleyn 1 year before announcing the Act of Supremacy. Henry VIII was very unhappy when Anne Boleyn gave birth to a girl named Elizabeth, leaving him without a male heir. Henry VIII soon decided to divorce Anne Boleyn and had her arrested. Anne Boleyn was accused of being unfaithful to the English king and was beheaded. 10 days after the execution of Anne Boleyn, Henry VIII would marry Jane Seymour. Jane Seymour would provide a son named Edward. Sadly, Jane died soon after. Henry VIII's 4th marriage was to Anne of Cleves. This was a political marriage, like the marriage to Catherine of Aragon. The purpose of this marriage was to ally England with the Protestants in Germany. Henry VIII became bored with Anne of Cleves, divorcing her after a few months. Henry VIII would also have the man who arranged this marriage killed. Henry's 5th marriage was to Catherine Howard. Soon after the wedding, he found out that Catherine Howard loved another man. Henry VIII had Catherine Howard killed by beheading for her unfaithfulness. Henry VI and last wife was Catherine Parr, who was lucky and outlived Henry VIII. Henry VIII had 3 children. Edward VI ruled for only 6 years. Mary Tudor, Henry's daughter by Catherine of Aragon, ruled for 5 years. Under the reign of Mary Tudor, English became an official Catholic country. Mary married King Philip II of Spain, a Catholic. Mary Tudor is known as Bloody Mary because during her reign, many Protestants were put to death for not converting to Catholicism. After Mary Tudor's reign, her half-sister Elizabeth became queen. Queen Elizabeth I was one of the greatest rulers in history, ruling from 1588 to 1603. England returned to being a Protestant country under her rule. England also defeated the Spanish navy of King Philip II, who had been the husband of Bloody Mary. Under the rule of Elizabeth I, England became one of the most powerful nations in the world. With Elizabeth's death, the Tudor monarchy ended because there was no heir to inherit the throne. The Tudor monarchy included the reigns of Henry VII, Henry VIII, Edward VI, Mary Tudor, and Elizabeth I. The Reconquista. After the Muslim conquest of Spain, Spain had a tradition of religious tolerance or respect for the opinions and practices of others. Christians, Jews, and Muslims lived in relative peace. Christian warriors of Europe, spurred on by the Pope, attempted to expel or force out Muslims from Spain. This was known as the Reconquista or Reconquest, and part of an effort by the Roman Catholic Church to recover Christian lands from Muslims. In 1469, Isabella of Castile married Ferdinand of Aragon, two of the most powerful Christian kingdoms in Spain, and opened the way for Spain to become a unified state. The two monarchs conquered the last Muslim kingdom of Granada in 1492, and the Reconquista was complete. This crusading spirit linked religion with Spanish nationalism and became disastrous for Spaniards who were not Christian. The Spanish Inquisition. In order to make Spain a Catholic country, the king and queen asked the Pope's permission in 1478 to set up a church court of inquisition. The purpose was to get confessions from people opposed to the Roman Catholic Church and punish heretics, people who opposed the Church's teachings. A crusade against Jews and Muslims began. The Inquisition took place in many parts of Europe, but mainly in France, Germany, and Spain. It was an organization of the Church whose job it was to find and judge heretics. Queen Isabella was determined to bring religious and political unity to Spain. Queen Isabella first ended the policy of religious tolerance for Muslim rule. Queen Isabella then was given permission from the Pope to create the Inquisition to try people accused of heresy against the Church. The primary suspects were Jews and Muslims who had converted to Christianity. Inquisition agents suspected that converted Jews and Muslims were all guilty, and the church courts demanded they confess. The Inquisition would torture people to get confessions of guilt. If suspects refused, they were again tortured. If the suspects confessed their guilt, true or not, they were burned at the stake. Between 1478 and 1490, over 2,000 men and women were executed by the Inquisition. In 1492, the same year as the conquest of Granada, Isabella and Ferdinand also began the persecution of 200,000 Spanish Jews who openly practiced their religion and refused conversion. The majority of Jewish people, about 130,000, chose exile. Entire families and communities departed in ships and caravans to find other lands. In August of 1492, Christopher Columbus witnessed and recorded the event in his diary. Columbus was about to leave on the voyage he hoped would lead to Asia, but took him to the Americas. Some exiled Jews sailed with him, such as a ship's doctor and interpreter. Fun fact: Christopher Columbus was born in the city of Genoa in Italy. By the time he was 20 years old, he was an experienced voyager for many businesses in Genoa. Columbus's dream of exploration brought him to the courts of every monarch in Italy, Spain, and Portugal, but nobody could afford to send ships on risky voyages. It wasn't until 1492, when the final expulsion of Jews in Spain and Spain's claiming their wealth, that Columbus was able to secure the resources he required. What may be one of the most important voyages of mankind's history was funded almost entirely by stolen wealth. Later, a few Jews became early settlers in the Americas. Most of the exiled Jews went to Muslim countries of Southwest Asia, lands that are now Iran, Syria, Israel, and Jordan. In 1496, the remaining Jews were forced to leave Portugal. In 1502, Isabella ordered all Muslims who had not converted to Christianity to leave her kingdom. Isabella had achieved unity by expelling the Jews and Muslims, but also ruined two skilled, educated groups of people who had contributed to Spain and Portugal's economy and culture. What next? Take the time to go back and review the lesson on your own. After your review, complete the lesson review for the lesson and submit for grading. Remember, your submission should follow all the rules for standard written English. All submissions must be written in your own words and sources used cited at the end. How to cite sources in APA format. When you reference a source within an APA-style paper, whether it is using a direct quote, repurposing an image, or simply referring to an idea or theory, you should insert an in-text citation, the author's surname, and the date of publication within parentheses, straight after a direct quote. A URL of citationmachine.net will assist you in creating citations.